Hello everyone, welcome to today's session on top 10 commonly asked interview questions on Python. So now that our Python sessions are basically over, we have discussed anything and everything from lists to sets to dictionaries, tuples, how to read files, etc. etc. We'll now do a few live sessions on some interview questions, some good practices to follow while writing Python code, and maybe down the line we'll take up some questions that you guys are still facing difficulty on. So like I always do, let me know what topics you would want a more detailed discussion on, so that next few sessions we can revise them up and then maybe do some session on coding questions, etc. Okay, and with that, well, a happy new year to all of you. I think this is the first session I am doing in 2018. So yeah, I hope you had a great start to the new year, and I hope you learn a lot with us in this new year. All right. So who all have joined? Ravina, we have Lakshmikant Reddy, Rupesh, Ravani, Ravi, we have Hira. No, Java is not going on. I am planning to do maybe Java session next week sometime, because it's been long. We started with Python series and many of you have requested on the videos to do a Java session again. So maybe next week we will do another interview question kind of session on Java. All right. Hi Lakshmikant, good evening. Okay, cool. So let's start with the session. We have Sridevi, Roshin, Shravani. All right. So let's start. Let me just switch back to the PPT. All right. So first off, let's start with, I hope you guys have all seen the Python tutorials. If not, you can go back and watch whichever you have missed off. But this is kind of a consolidated of all those previous sessions, a consolidated session where we'll take a look at a few interview questions that are commonly asked, freshers or otherwise, in any Python interview you give. So starting off with fairly simple, how to transform a string to list in Python. Now since we have done a full tutorial, I'm expecting many of you to give answers to these questions. Hi Michael, good evening. Hi Vijay. Hi Vikram. Yeah, so how do you transform a string to a list in Python? It's fairly simple, one-liner question. So this is how, let's say, your string looks like. From this, you want to transform it to a list that is so from here to here. How is this process done? Hello Anil, just started with the first question. So the simple one-liner way to convert a string to a list in Python. You don't have to put your head into it. There's nothing much to think about. It's a simple one line in which you simply pass your string into the list function. Okay? And that is all. This one line will give you a list out of a string. So if you have a bigger string, let's say you assign it to a variable, want to convert it to a list, again simply pass the variable into this list function. and that's all. It will give you a list from this string. All right. Now next is reverse of this. How to transform a list to string in Python. How do we do list to string? Hi Sai Gupta, hello Rupesh. Answer guys, come on. I'm hoping you guys have all gone through these tutorials and understood everything. Transform a list to string. How do we do that? Now let me take the same example of name. Let's say I have the list name that has, let's say, stop. So S, T, O and P. All right. So this is my list. Now what I want to do is I want to convert this list into a string. So my output should be this. What do we do to get this output? Tech videos I've joined, Mahmood, Sita. Time of class, which is 6 to 7. Hopefully we'll wrap up these 10 questions by 7. Tamli boys, hello. Answers, people, answers, try. Okay, hint is that you use the function join. Still nothing? So what do you have to do is, let's say we create a new variable, name underscore str, all right, equals to space string dot join, and in this you pass the list that you want to join and convert into string. So this will take your name list and give you the string that will be stored in the variable name underscore str. Now since this is an empty code, there is nothing, not even a space between this. So you get this. Let's say you do this instead of empty string. Joining on X. You're joining your list on X. So what will this give you as output? Mahmood responded join name. So if you do X dot join name, give me the string that will come out as output. What you are doing is you are basically adding these elements to a string, and this is what comes in between two elements of the list. So in the first case, since it was blank, it will give you output as stop, right? In the second case, we are joining with X. Okay, so when we join with X, what comes as output is SX TX OXP. So basically every element of the list, these are the elements of the list, 1 2 3 4, correct? Every element of the list is joined with whatever you provide here before the dot. In the first case, Mahmood has asked why we're using the blank quotes. In the first case, since the blank quote specify there is nothing, it directly joined the list elements, right? But in the second case, as you are giving X, it will join the list elements with X in between. All right. Gursimar answered wrong, so I hope I have clarified your doubt, Gursimar. Let's say now next time you give some random 1, 2, 3, and then again the same thing, right? Join name. So you have S 1, 2, 3, T 1, 2, 3, O, then again O 1, 2, 3, and P. So the list elements, correct? And whatever you provide before the dot, this is with which you join the list elements. Okay? Shravani is asking how that would happen appending the empty string to a list. You're not appending something. By appending, Shravani, when you use the word append, it means there is a list or a string and you are adding something after it. This process is called append, right? When you use the word append, this is what is happening. There's already something, you're adding something extra at the end. What is happening here is we are joining the elements of the string, and when we are joining the elements of the string, what goes in between the join is specified before the dot in quotes. So if inside quotes you don't give anything, any space, no space, nothing, just the quotes, it will give you the string. If you give a space, it will give you S, then space, then T, then space, O, then space, and P. So Gursimar answered that 1, 2, 3 S, 1, 2, 3 T. That's not how it happens. Remember, the first element of the list starts your string. So the first element of the list followed by whatever you are joining it on, 1, 2, 3. Then the second element, then 1, 2, 3, and so on. Okay, this is the correct. You don't start with 1, 2, 3 followed by the first element. This is wrong. So the list element followed by whatever you are joining it on. Then again, list element followed by whatever you are joining it on. That is how join works, and that's how you convert basically a list to a string in Python. All right. So I'm hoping this is now clear to everyone. I'll jump on to the next question. What is negative index in Python? So most of you who have worked on say C or Java before, seen arrays before, you know that when you want to extract the elements of an array, or when you want to traverse through the elements of an array, you use the index of the array. So the index starts from 0, the first element is at 0, then the next is at 1, then 2, then 3, and so on. So that is basically known as indexing, and it is positive indexing. Now in Python, we have a concept known as negative index. And since I have given you this much hint, now you should be able to tell me what is a negative index in Python. Any guesses? You should have already seen it in one of the very starting videos where we talked about arrays or strings. Whatever you want to traverse through in Python, you can use negative index to do that. Or say another way this question is generally asked is if you have to access the last element of the list without traversing through the list, how do you do that? So Vishak says, I hope I'm getting the name right, it will start from the back, -1 is the first element from the back. And Shravani also got it, that she says last index starts from negative numbering in a reverse manner. All right, so let me lay it out, draw it out for you guys. Let's say we have or even if I ignore the list part, let's say we have an array or a simple string. So the first index starts with 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, negative indexing in Python means that you can also refer to -1. Let's say if this is name, let's keep the example, although hello is not a name, but since we have taken it as an example, we will continue with it. So let's say we have name hello, right? If you say name 0, it will give you H. If you say name 3, it will give you L, which is what we have seen always. Now what Python additionally gives us is if you do name -1, it will give you O. Or if you know you have to access the second last or third last element, let's say you have to take out the third last, so you just say name -3 and you get the third last element in your string or array or list, right? That is negative index in Python. Cool. So next up we have difference between lists and tuples. We have seen what lists are, we have seen what tuples are. What is the difference between a list and a tuple? What is used where? What kind of data is stored in which? If you have to store some data, how do you decide whether you have to use a list or you have to use a tuple? So whatever questions I said, they are all different versions of the same question that boils down to what is the difference between list and tuple. List has square braces. Shravani says, okay, we have got one syntax difference by Shravani. She says list have square braces and tuples have parentheses. All right, Shravani, that is the correct one. And that is the syntax difference. So when you want to create a list, you give square braces. When you want to create a tuple, you give parentheses. Kursimer says list is mutable. Okay, we have one more difference. Lists are mutable and tuples are immutable. All right, let me just, for our ease of understanding, so we have 1, 2, what next? Any other guesses or any other answers, not guesses? So list is mutable, tuples are immutable. The syntax difference: when you want to create a list, you use square braces. When you want to create a tuple, you use parentheses. Now apart from that, there is one more difference that you will most often see in many websites, which would say that list is homogeneous, that is, it stores elements of same type, whereas tuples are heterogeneous, that is, it will store elements of different type. Okay, but this difference is incorrect. I'm just pointing it out because in many of the websites it is given as list store only same data type, and tuples are used when you have to store different data type values, which is wrong. So both lists and tuples allow heterogeneous data type to be added. Alright. Now, while we are discussing list and tuple differences, I also want to point out that, which is not a difference, it is a similarity between both, that lists and tuples both are ordered. So let's say you insert 1 followed by 2, then 10, then -1. When you iterate through that list and tuple, the result will also come in the same order in which you are inserting the values. So 1, 2, 10, -1. Alright. Mahmood is asking mutable meaning. Mutable and immutable are the two terms that are very widely used in any programming language when you want to specify whether you can change a particular data type after its creation or not. So by mutable, you mean, let me just add it right there. By mutable, you mean it doesn't change. By immutable mean it can change after the assignment. So you can keep adding more and more to it, whereas mutable means you cannot keep adding more and more. So once you create a list with, let's say, 5 elements, and then maybe you change it, you add the 6th element or 7th element, every time it creates a new list for you. It is not adding to the first list, although the name and everything remains the same, but behind the scenes a new object is created which takes those elements. Whereas in tuples it stays the same and everything keeps on adding to the same tuple. So that's why lists are called as mutable and tuples are called as immutable. And I'm hoping I have mentioned it correctly. Yeah, sorry. Can change and cannot change. Sorry, my bad, I wrote it wrong. So mutable means it can change and immutable means it cannot change. Alright? Yeah, Shravani, I noticed I mentioned it wrong. So mutable can change, immutable cannot change. Alright? Okay, what else do we have? Any other doubts on this? Cool. So we have our differences and similarities all laid out on this now. The syntax difference, the mutable, immutable difference, the ordered, both are ordered, and wherever you see that one is homogeneous, one is heterogeneous, it is wrong. Both of them can take heterogeneous data. Alright? Cool. So let's move on to the next one. Differences between Python 2 and Python 3. This is a question that is now most often asked because many people are now moving from Python 2 to Python 3. Most of them who started learning Python an year or two before would still maybe be working on Python 2, but it is very essential that you know the difference between the two. So what are the 3 differences between Python 2 and Python 3? Visak says list has more methods compared to tuple, which is true, but it is not kind of a difference. It has more methods, but for tuples also, whatever you want to do, you can write methods. So that doesn't count as a difference. Okay, first is print statement. Which is true. print is a function in Python 3 and statement in 2, and the syntax of both is given. So if you sum anywhere in a program, let's say you are reading a program on a website, if you see print written like this, like a function, that means the code is written in Python 3. Whereas if you see it written like this, a statement, that means the code there is in Python 2. Alright, so that is the first difference between Python 2 and Python 3. Now what is the second one? Which is fairly simple and easy if someone can point it out for me. The next is the floating point in Python 3. So whenever you use floating point in Python 3, it gives you a decimal value. Sorry, the division operator in Python gives you a decimal value, whereas in Python 2 you will get a truncated value. So the division operators work differently in Python 2 and Python 3. Now in Python 3, if you want the truncated value, what you do is, there's another operator given for this, that is double backslash. So when you do 43 by 2 in Python 3, then you will get the output as 21. Alright. So in some written technical exams, you might get a question as to what is this operator's output, division operator's output. So make sure that you are aware of this difference, and it should be ideally clearly mentioned in the question paper that it is Python 2 or Python 3, right? And again, you should be aware that there is one operator in Python 3 which gives us this truncated value, which is basically the quotient of the division. All right. And the third and the final difference is the range, which Vikas has already mentioned. The range, etc., returns iterators or generators in Python 3, whereas they return a list in Python 2. Vikas says Python 2 uses range in X range, but Python 3 uses only X range. Because Python 3 also uses the range function. It is just that in Python 3 you will get an iterator or generator as an output, while as Python 2 will return a list when you use range. Alright. So those are the three differences that you should always keep in mind when you are working on Python, depending on which Python version you are working on. Are you on some Python 2 version or you are on 3 version? Because depending on that, you will use your print statements, you will use your division operators, and you will use your range, etc., other functions to get the right output that you desire from your program. All right. So keep in mind these changes and keep in mind what you're working on, what your coding company is coding on. They are using Python 2 or they are using Python 3. All right. Now next up is, what does zip do? Hi Nagesh. What does zip function do? Zip is one of the important functions in Python that you will see in professional codes at many points. What does zip do? Let me start giving you some hints to take the answer out. Zip is used on list. Let's say I have a list 1, that is 1 3 4 8. Okay, let's close it at that. And I have a list 2, that is 5 25 9 13. Random numbers, they don't make any sense, so don't worry about that. Just an example, we have a list 1 1 3 4 8, we have a list 2 5 25 9 13. So what will zip do? Shravani says it will combine the list, which is correct. So when you pass two lists to a zip, this goes as input to the zip function. Okay, the output is a combination of these two. How? One followed by the other. So the first element of list 1, then 5 3 25 4 9 8 13. So zip basically combines the two lists for you and gives you the output. Alright, now my next question on this zip would be, what if one of your list has extra elements? Let's say our list 1 has 2 18. Now the number of elements are different. What will happen then? Any guesses? So zip basically forms your pairs 1 5 3 25 4 9. All right, let me give another example. Let's say we have 1 5 4 8 2 and 5 25 9 13. So what zip does is, you apply zip on these two, it will give you pair combination of these two lists. Correct. So it will give you 1 5 5 25 4 9, then we have 8 13, and it will continue doing this till you reach a point where either both the list end or one of the lists that is given ends. So in this case, for 2 we don't have a counterpart, there is nothing. So 2 will not come at 8 13, it will stop, and this will come as your output. Alright, so it basically produces a list of tuples, like Ashokan mentioned here. Zip will produce a list of tuples. Okay, it will not combine with 0. Vishak, if there is nothing in one of the lists, any one of the, let's say I'm taking 2 examples, it can be 3, it can be 4 lists, it can be even 5 lists. So wherever the any one of the list ends, at that point it will stop. So if say you have another list which has X Y Z T P O R, so it will not go to P O R, it will again stop making pairs at the first list where it stops. Okay, so then you will have X15, Y525, Z49, T813, and it will stop there because this list stops at 13. So wherever the any one of the list first stops, the whole zipping process stops there. After that, whatever are extra in any of the list doesn't matter. All right. Cool. So I'll move on to the next question. I hope zip is clear to all of you now. So like it mentions here, it will take multiple lists, say list 1, list 2, etc., and transform them into a single list of tuples by taking the corresponding elements of the list. So as you see, we are taking corresponding elements of the list. X, 1, Y, right? So X, 1, 5 will be 1 pair. The next second element of every list, Y, 5, 25, Y, 5, 25, right? And it will continue. So it will taking the corresponding elements of the list that are passed as parameters. Okay. And the exception that I mentioned, whenever the given lists are of different lengths, zip stops generating tuples when the first list ends. So wherever the first list is ending, the zip will stop generating tuples. Okay. Cool. So now explain the shortest way to open a text file and display its contents. Now there aren't 10-15 ways of which I have asked you the shortest, but basically I wanted to ask you for one particular thing for which I have written shortest here. Explain the shortest way to open a text file and display its contents. So last Monday's session, Ashokan explained all about opening the file and reading the file, etc. So file input output we saw in the last session. How do you open text file and display its contents? So you might be aware of the different options to open a file, right? There is R, which is read-only mode. There is W, which is write-only mode. And then there is RW, which is obviously read-write mode. So if you open a file in read-only mode, you won't be able to do any write operations. If you open a file in write-only mode, you will not be able to read it. Correct? So these are the 3 modes in which you can open. Now to answer the question, Shravani says for line in open file name. That is not the answer I'm looking for, Shravani. Print line. Basically, okay, let me rephrase this question and ask it to you in a different way. How do you open a text file using, let's say, using with operator? Let's rephrase our question. Vikas says file name.txt, rw, open file name.txt, rw. Cool, let me jump on to the next. So when you say with open file name and then you specify the mode, all right, as fp, and then inside file data fp.read. Now everything that is in the file, don't have to go line by line like Shravani. In your case, you pointed out the output as for line in open file name and then print line. You're doing it one line at a time. What this will do is it will read your file, it will assign the content to file data, and print file data will then print your file. Okay, so with open the file name, Ashokan pointed out file name in quotes, and whatever mode you are specifying, R or RW or W, that also in quotes. Alright, now what does with help you here? When you use with, it can open file, it can process data present in the file, and it can also close the file without calling explicitly the close function. So when you open any file using with, you can do everything in there. Alright, don't have to explicitly close or do something for explicitly editing or processing the data. Open the file, read the file, assigned it to file data, and then if you want to read, you print the file data, or whatever you want to do, you can do with the file data. Okay, so that is basically what I wanted to point out, the use of this with for doing your file operations, file reading, file processing data, etc. All right, next up is when are dictionary, list and set used. So individually in the previous sessions we have seen all these three. We have seen a session on dictionary, we have done list in detail, we have seen sets, tuples, etc, etc. Everything is done in detail. But now if you have to take an overview of the three and you have to say dictionary, list, set, okay, in this case I'll go for a dictionary, in this case I'll go for a list, in this case I'll go for a set. So what is the general overview of these three, or what is the basic distinction between the use of these three, dictionary, list and set? Any guesses? Ashokan has pointed out you can do it even shorter. Print open stopwords.txt and then .read. He has given a one-liner for you guys in the chat. I'll write it down for those of you who are not on the chat. Print, then we have open. Let's say this is the file name, stopwords.txt, and then we have .read. Basically a one-liner to do your stuff, but then he says it is not a good practice. But then again, if you have any questions on let's say you go to any interview and you have this multiple lines of code options, MCQ, where one of the lines is this, you can clearly point out that this is the correct option to read your line. Okay, print open stopwords.txt .read. Alright, moving on to the next. When are dictionary, list and set used? So let me quickly give you the distinction. List, what it does is, the most important point, it keeps the insertion order intact. So whenever you want your insertion order to be maintained, you can opt for list. Alright. Dictionaries and set, on the other hand, they don't maintain the insertion order. Cool. Another thing that is very distinct and obvious in the differences is in dictionary you have key value pair, whereas list and sets are store only values. So let's say one common statement, when you want to store some values that maintain the order of the values, you go for list. When you want to store some values, you don't worry about the order, you can go for set. And when you want to store a data that is in key value pair, you go for dictionary. Alright, so this is basically the crux of the differences. Three cases where you will use what, list, or set or dictionary. Alright. Next up, how do you create a dictionary which can preserve the order of pairs? There is a function that you can use. So in dictionary, when you insert, like I said before in this question, the order is not maintained. So let's say you have inserted 1 comma a before, and then next you insert 2 comma b. Now when you iterate through your dictionary, it might show you 2 comma b before 1 comma a. The order is not maintained in a dictionary. So how do you create a dictionary which preserves the order of pairs? Any guesses? There's a direct function that you can use. All right, no answers for this one. Okay, basically what you need to do for this is you need to import collections. Yeah, Shokan pointed it out. Let me mention it also. Preserves the insertion order of pairs. Okay. So not the order in which, let's say you have two pairs, 1A, 2B. We are not talking about this order. All right, this will remain the same because this is key, this is value. The insertion order. So if you have inserted this first and this second, when you iterate through, you should get this first and this as second. So let's see, we have a dictionary 1, let's say A 1 and B 2. Let's say this is our dictionary. So what you do is you call the ordered dict function of this of collections. What this will do is it will always give you the pairs in order, in the same insertion order that you put it in the first place. All right. Next, okay, ordered dict is a dictionary subclass that remembers the order in which its contents are added. It's part of the collections. You need to import collections to use this ordered dict. All right, now what is PEP8? So anyone who knows Python or who's learning Python or who has worked on Python should be aware of what is PEP8. Ideally should have gone through this PEP8 at least once. So what is PEP8? Any ideas? It is a function, it is a variable, it is a list, tuple, document, directory, folder. What is PEP8? Tool to check your Python code. Shravani, what do you mean by check your Python code? If you write a program, PEP8 will not tell you whether your program is right or wrong, correct? So if you are saying it is a tool to check your Python code, as an interviewer, your phrasing of statement is pretty incorrect. It is not a tool. It will not check your Python code. It will not tell you whether your code will execute or not. It will not tell you whether it will give you the desired output or not. So what's the right way to phrase it? What is PEP8? Let me actually show you guys. It's a style guide for Python code. So if you go to the document, right? So this is the link, python.org dev PEPS. All you have to do is you search for PEP8. You don't have to remember the link. Search for PEP8. And the first link that you see is the style guide for Python code. Now when you click on this, yeah, Shravani, that's a better phrasing, checking against the style conventions of PEP8. So this is a standard guideline for Python programming, how you should write your code, and it has everything inside. So anyone who is aspiring to learn Python or who is working on Python should have gone through this document at least once. So it starts with introduction, then it has a few details of how the code should be laid out, indentation, maximum line length, blank lines, source file encoding, naming conventions, how you should name your variables in the code, how does comments work in the code, right? And how constant should be named, how function and variable name should be given, then programming recommendation, what are function annotations, what are variable annotations. So this is all basic programming that should be basic programming syntax alerts that you should be aware of when working on Python. So names to avoid, let's take a look at that. Never use the characters L lowercase letter or O uppercase letter or I uppercase letter as single character variable names, because in some fonts these characters are indistinguishable. So this will not help you in how you should write your program logic, etc., but this will give you basic understanding of how you should be writing your code so that it is easily readable for everyone else, as well as it is easily readable for you also, right? Down the line, if you have written a piece of program in your company and later on, let's say you want to go back to that piece of code and do some bug fixes in that code or do some enhancement requests that have come to you for that code, you should be able to read it and clearly figure out, okay, this piece of code was doing this, then this next few lines of code was doing this. So these are some best practices that you should be following for writing a good Python code. All right. So I'll suggest you go through this document. Like I said, don't have to bother about link. Google search PEP8 and it will give you the python.org documentation link, which you all should go through, and make sure when you are writing code, even if you are writing it for just practicing, make sure to follow the advices that are given in this document. All right, cool. So let's now jump on to the next question. And we don't have a next question. This was our 10th and last question. All right. So at this point of time, now that we have seen how the style coding should be, we have seen questions on dictionary, list, set, file we have taken a look at, zip function we have seen, Python 2, Python 3 differences, which all of you should be aware of, difference between list and tuple, negative indexing, string to list, list to string, and back. All right. So that was it for this session, guys. Now before I close the session, I would want to know what all topics you would want to see in the future sessions. Is it Java that you would want to take a look at, or is there some specific topic in Python that you would want more interview questions on? like I said before, I'll probably be doing a coding interview, another session like this, in which we'll take a look at few important interview questions with the code, so that we take a look at that. All right. Apart from that, if you guys have any queries, any comments, any topics that you would want to take up in the future sessions, you can always drop a comment on the video. We'll take a look at it and we will try to accommodate all your requests. I remember when the last session I took, a few of you requested on interview questions in Java. So maybe down the line we'll do a Java session where we take few coding interview questions in Java. Vikas says generator, decorator and error handling. All right. We will maybe next week or next to next week we can take up a session. Oops in Python. Shravani, there are a few videos on the channel that are, let me just quickly go to it and show you. All right, so let's see, you can see the screen now. Let's go to YouTube. We can maybe do one more session on object-oriented oops in Python. Okay, so oops in Python, all right, that we'll do. In Java we have already done. In Python I think we have not done any session on object-oriented programming. So object-oriented, okay, generators, decorators, error handling in Python, then we have object-oriented programming in Python. All right, cool. Will this video be available in the channel? Yes, this video will be available in the channel. So if you go to the page, so right now you can see it at the very top of the page, the current live stream. As soon as the live stream closes, all you have to do is go to the channel. Okay, let me find it out. Right, so you go to the videos, and the very first video in the videos you will see is top 10 commonly asked important Python interview questions. So once this session is over, go to the videos tab and you can find the video here. All right, and if you have any questions, you can, like I said before, open the video, drop in a comment, and we'll make sure to take it up in the next session. Functions concept in Python. Okay, Shravani, let's do that in an interview question kind of series, where I'll maybe take up 5-6 random questions that will be around functions only. So then you will have a better clarity of how to use functions in Python. All right, so I'll close off on that. Keep commenting with whatever you want, and we'll make sure that there are more live sessions coming up where we discuss all these things, or maybe down the line we'll also create a playlist where a few questions will keep uploading depending on how many questions you guys have. All right, Lambda also. Okay, cool, good. So I have a bunch of options to choose from for the next session. We have object-oriented programming, we have functions, we have generators, decorators, Lambda. Okay, Lambda is a popular request. All right, we have Lambda, we have error handling. That was not discussed in previous sessions. All right, cool. So with that note, I'll leave you now. Go read the document PEP8 if you haven't already, and keep practicing. I'll see you in the next session. Bye bye.